Hello everyone, welcome back to ASR, African Stories Realized. This is a full recap of Outlaws Season 1, the TV show on Showmax, which has been billed as South Africa's first ever Western. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Outlaws is an epic drama that presents the story of two families at war with each other, the Zulu cattle farming Biela clan and the Basotho cattle raiding Teule family. Episode 1 opens up with a raging storm that forces the Biela family out of their sleep. Bandile Biela finds himself responsible for the family's cattle being left exposed to the mountains. Accompanied by his father and other ranchers, he crosses the flooded river, returning with their precious herd. We are then introduced to the Teule family, which is led by Moretlo, who has been running a cattle theft syndicate in the Underberg region of KZN for years. She is supported by her son Leruo, her power-hungry brother Leabua, and his hard-headed cousin Tlali. Leruo assembles a team for a daring raid on the Zulus to steal their cattle. The raid unfolds with the Basotho bribing a guard named Mafaf, who allows the Sotho to enter and steal the cattle, leading to a dramatic chase and shootout, with even the Zulu women raising their weapons. However, the Zulus were outnumbered and not prepared to pursue the Basotho, who managed to get away with the cattle. The episode ends with Becky declaring war on the Basotho and vowing to reclaim their cattle as the rivalry begins. Episode 2 continues with the rivalry between the two families intensifying. Tlali disregards his cousin's orders and remains behind in order to steal even more cows. This would lead to a tragedy when he crossed paths with Becky and Nandi, who were still gathering up some cattle that got loose during the shootout. Despite the couple pleading for their lives, Tlali murdered them in cold blood and made no mention of it to his cousin when he returned. This act left Bandile and Sihle without parents, with both of them vowing to avenge their death. The Basotho wasted no time rebranding the Biela cattle and taking it across the border to Lesotho. The news of the murder spread fast, making it difficult for the Teules to sell the stolen cattle. Leruo eventually finds out Tlali was responsible for Becky and Nandi's murders. He confronts his cousin, but passes out after aggravating the wound he sustained in the cattle raid. Meanwhile, Sihle, who is engaged to Kwanele, struggles to be present in the relationship, even though her fiancé is showing full support. Shortly after her parents' funeral, Sihle meets Leruo, who Tlali had dropped off at the hospital for medical attention. Sparks begin to fly between the two, with both of them unaware of their mutual connection to the raid. The chemistry between the two is established, with Leruo complimenting Sihle on her beauty. The episode ends with Sihle flirting with Leruo as she nurses his wounds, not knowing that his family is responsible for the cattle theft that resulted in her parents' death and the destruction of their farm. I like the blend of Western elements and African storytelling. Outlaws has assembled a stellar cast of South African and Lesotho talent, led by Thembinkosi Mthembu, Letlhogonolo Maeza, and Mabato Mogomuti, to name a few. Episode 5 picks up where last week left off, with Leruo and Sihle catching up at the hospital. However, their moment is interrupted by the police, who take Leruo into custody. Luckily for Leruo, the captain is on the Sotho's payroll and releases him shortly after his arrest. Sihle arrives at the police station after Leruo has been released, but manages to get his full name. Kwanele later suggests him and Sihle move in together, but she shuts him down, with her mind clearly preoccupied by Leruo. Meanwhile, Bandile, armed with the alias Sefofane, continues his search for the infamous cattle raider. It's revealed that Bandile's right-hand man, Sepamola, has ties to the Sotho when he calls Tladi in search of Sefofane. He offers Tladi money in exchange for information on Sefofane. Bandile and Sepamola are given an address for Sefofane, and the episode ends with them knocking on the door of what they believe to be Sefofane's house. Episode 6 picks up at the real Sefofane's house, with Tladi arriving to warn his cousin and aunt about the Zulus' hunt for Sefofane. Moretlo is grateful for Tladi's smart thinking and allows him to rejoin the gang, accompanying Leruo on another raid. Meanwhile, Sepamola and Bandile come face to face with the man they believe to be responsible for his parents' death. Bandile guns him down, but Sepamola is wounded in the shootout that ensues. Bandile rushes him back to the farm where Sihle treats Sepamola, and news of the massacre of Sefofane and his family begins to spread. The news spooks Moreto, who warns the boys to never reveal their involvement in the Okabeni murders. We are then introduced to the top four in a meeting where they confront Moreto about the fallout of the Okabeni farm murders. Bandile's wife is disappointed in his actions, and just as he tries to put the matter behind him, the Zulu farmer who was raided earlier comes to him for help, requesting that Bandile lead the Zulu farmers in the impending war against the Soto raiders. Meanwhile, Kwanele confronts Sihle about the massacred cattle thieves in Lesotho and why they've been drifting apart. Sihle protects her brother and asks Kwanele to give her some space. On her way back from work, Sihle and Leruo are reunited when her car breaks down and Leruo arrives on horseback to assist. She returns his bracelet and Leruo offers her a lift to the nearest garage. The episode ends with the two riding away on horseback as their connection continues to grow. Episode 7 picks up where last week left off, with our two lovebirds, Leruo and Sihle, stealing a moment together in the woods, where Leruo only now learns Sihle's name. The two get closer, with Leruo taking her number, but as the episode goes on, she pulls away from him as the guilt of her impending marriage to Kwanele begins to eat away at her. Sihle ultimately comes to a decision to follow through with the wedding, something she seemingly regrets when the Biela family officially receives a letter of intent from Kwanele's family. Bandile reveals to his wife that the other Zulu farmers requested his help catching the raiders, but he declined. Meanwhile, Leruo's mother has noticed a recent change in her son and realizes that it has something to do with a woman. Little does she know it's a Zulu woman. Moreto informs Leruo that the top four are not happy with the murders of Sefofane and his family and advises him to lay low. Leruo and Tladi then get into an argument over Tladi's pay. Leruo shuts him down, but Tladi isn't satisfied. The episode ends with Tladi starting a mutiny amongst Leruo's men, planning an ill-advised raid without the top four's permission. Episode 8 picks up with the Biela family preparing to welcome Kwanele's family for Sihle's lobola negotiations. Sihle, suspecting her uncle will be difficult and drive a hard bargain, begs Bandile to assist with the negotiations, to which he reluctantly agrees. Kwanele's family, the Dlaminis, arrive for the negotiations, with Sihle growing increasingly anxious about her decision. The negotiations get off on a bad foot, with Sihle's uncle hilariously rejecting the Dlamini's opening offer of 20 cows. The two families ultimately come to an agreement, with the Dlaminis immediately paying in cash. Sihle, however, appears to regret her decision after her aunt informs her of what's expected from a Zulu wife. Meanwhile, Moreto consoles her son after Sihle pushes him away. Leruo's girlfriend suspects that he is seeing someone else and eventually confronts him and seemingly breaks up with him. This doesn't deter Leruo, as he makes his way to the hospital where Sihle works, but to his dismay, it's revealed to him that Sihle is engaged to be married, and her lobola negotiations are currently underway. Leruo later receives an intimate call from Sihle, in which he serenaded her with poetry before she hung up on him. Little does he know that Tladi is preparing to lead a raid despite his father warning him of going on a heist without doing recon and surveillance first. Tladi and his men embark on their raid, but the episode ends when they arrive at the farm and a shootout ensues, with the bloodthirsty Tladi killing everyone in sight and rounding up the cattle. Episode 9 picks up in the aftermath of Tladi's deadly raid as he argues with his men who requested a fair split of their spoils. The police arrive at the site of the massacre, and with valuable information from the surviving witness, they decide to pursue Tladi and his men before they disappear into the mountains of Lesotho. The police encountered the Basotho gang in the forest, and a shootout ensued, with Tladi and his men retreating, but not before one of them was slain. Meanwhile, Sihle is doing her best to move on with Kwanele, whilst Leruo hits the bar and drowns his sorrows. A young boy approaches him and requests to join his gang. After agreeing to let the young man join his gang, a drunk Leruo made his way back to his ex's place where they reconciled and he promised to marry her. Meanwhile, the surviving witness from Tladi's raid, Sipho, arrives at the Biela home and requests Bandile's help in catching the raiders that killed his family and stole their cattle. Back in Lesotho, Tladi and his men arrived with the cattle, but the loss of one of their own does not go well amongst the group. The episode ends with Tladi reporting the death to his father. Episode 10 picks up with Leruo and his ex, Nyakalo. Leruo presents her with one of 10 calves as lobola for a hand in marriage. Our boy set his own price. Moretlo, however, pays Nyakalo's mother a visit, where the two women come to an understanding. Tladi and his father are then confronted by the widow of the man who was killed during the shootout with the police. She holds the father and son Duwe at gunpoint, but then breaks down in front of them with grief. Bandile informs his wife, Nolwandle, that he has decided to lead the Zulu farmers against the Soto raiders, to which she is not pleased with. He holds a meeting for the Zulu farmers, where they discuss how they can work together to fight against the Soto raiders. At the meeting, some victims also testify to how the Basotho raiders terrorized them. Upon hearing the testimonies, Nolwandle softened her stance and put her support behind Bandile's mission. Meanwhile, Kwanele and Sihle catch up with Kwanele's father, who is very demanding of Sihle. He questions the couple about their plans to have children and is displeased when he is informed that Sihle will not only continue practicing as a doctor, but she will continue to do it under her maiden name, Biela. Sihle is disappointed with Kwanele's father's reaction and begins to regret her decision as she confides in one of the nurses at work. She then tries to contact Leruo, who is busy training his new recruit. To my surprise, Leruo decides to meet up with Sihle and the two have an intimate moment at their spot in the woods. The episode ends with the top 4 meeting with a mysterious figure who is revealed to be Kwanele's father. Episode 11 picks up with a meeting between the top 4 and Bab Dlamini, with the two sides blaming each other for the recent bloodshed between the Zulu farmers and the Soto raiders. To our surprise, Moretlo and Bab Dlamini spent the night together, where it's revealed that Bab Dlamini was the one who set up the Okabeni farm for the raid, and he seemingly encourages Moretlo to get rid of Bandile, who has become a thorn in the side of the Soto raiders. Meanwhile, Bandile and the other Zulu farmers look to arm themselves, with Spamola arranging a meetup with some Soto armed smugglers. The meetup was an intense one, with the smugglers almost killing the two men upon realizing that Bandile is a Zulu man. Bandile pleads his case and is able to return home with the weapons. Sihle and Leruo's love grows as they decide to stop leading on their significant others. Leruo visits Nyakalo and breaks off their engagement, to which his mother is not happy with. Sihle finally tells Kwanele that she no longer wants to marry him, but she probably should have informed her family first, because upon hearing the news, Bab Dlamini made his way to the Biela home. The episode ends with a confrontational Bab Dlamini busting into the Biela home, just as Sihle was about to inform her family that she had called off the wedding. Episode 12 picks up with the fallout of Sihle's decision to call off the wedding. The two families argue, but Bandile requests more time before they can discuss the matter further. He later confronts his sister about why she has suddenly changed her mind about Kwanele, but Sihle resists coming clean about Leruo. The two families meet again and decide to give Sihle more time to change her mind. Bandile once again confronts her about what has changed in her life, but she continues to resist and leaves for a camping date with Leruo. Meanwhile, Moretlo is paranoid and suspects that Nyakalo's mother may have bewitched them. She also laments the fact that they currently don't have a healer to protect and cleanse their gang before and after raids. Leruo brushes off his mother's concerns, and word finally reaches him that Tladi led an ill-fated raid which resulted in one of his raiders' deaths. Leruo confronts his cousin and ends up giving him a well-deserved beating. Thereafter, Leruo met up with Sihle for their camping date, while Tladi had an encounter of his own with Leruo's ex, Nyakalo. With their newly acquired weapons, Bandile trains the Zulu farmers, and not long after that, the opportunity rose for them to put their training into practice, killing 2 and capturing 1 Soto raider. But the episode ends with them calling for more bloodshed, with Bandile visibly uncomfortable with the actions of the farmers, a monster he created. Episode 13 picks up in the aftermath of the Zulu farmers standing up for themselves and capturing some Soto raiders. Bandile convinces the farmers to release the surviving Sotho raider in order to send a message to the top 4 and other raiders. Bandile and the farmers dispose of the dead bodies, but it's not long before the police discover them and begin suspecting the Zulu farmers. Detective Flope questions Bandile about the dead Sotho raiders, but instead he reminds the detective that he warned her the farmers would rise up if the police couldn't do their job. Meanwhile, Tladi and Nyakalo have been brought together by their sinister intentions. Nyakalo convinces Tladi to rob his aunt, but the plot backfires when Moretlo pulls out a shotgun, firing a warning shot to chase the couple away. While all this is going down, Sihle and Leruo are enjoying a romantic outing in the woods. The surviving Sotho raider that Bandile spared earlier in the episode returns, and it's revealed to be the son of one of the top 4 members. He reveals that Bandile is the leader of the Zulu farmers, and the episode ends with the top 4 members declaring that Bandile must die. Episode 14 picks up with Leruo and Sihle going their separate ways after their romantic getaway in the woods. Sihle gives Leruo some Zulu beads, which his mother later sees, and despite being infuriated that her son is dating a Zulu girl, she didn't seem surprised. Plus, they had bigger fish to fry. Moretlo informs his son that the top 4 have ordered a hit on Bandile, and that Leruo is responsible for carrying it out. Initially, Leruo resisted, but after some convincing from his mom, he eventually conceded and agreed to kill Bandile. Tladi and Nyakalo's relationship continues to grow as the sinister pair goes on a recruitment campaign to add more raiders to their ranks. Word of the Zulu farmers arming themselves has spread, and the raiders are reluctant to join them, but Nyakalo was able to win them over by reminding them who her mother is, promising that her muti would protect them on raids. Meanwhile, Sihle returns home and tells her family that she is no longer interested in getting married to Kwanele. Her aunt and uncle were not pleased, but Bandile supported his sister, immediately ordering his uncle to send word to the Dlaminis. The family did not get the opportunity to send the message because their dinner was interrupted by gunfire. The episode ends with Leruo aiming for Bandile with his rifle, but he accidentally shoots Sihle, who appeared out of nowhere. Episode 15 picks up in the aftermath of Sihle getting shot. Leruo is inconsolable as her family quickly rushes the wounded Biela to the hospital. At the hospital, it's revealed that Sihle survived after an operation, but she is still in a coma. The Dlaminis arrive at the hospital eager to help and get Sihle the best possible health care. Leruo returns home to inform his mother that the hit has failed, and instead, he shot the woman he loves. Meanwhile, Tladi returns from his first bloodless heist, to his proud father praising his efforts. Back at the hospital, Sihle's friend Phumzile calls Leruo to notify him that Sihle was shot and is still alive. Leruo makes his way to the hospital where Phumzile sneaks him in to see Sihle. He recites a poem for her, and the episode ends with Sihle waking up from her coma upon hearing the voice of her lover. Episode 16 picks up in the aftermath of Sihle waking up from her coma. She texts Leruo letting him know that his poem helped her wake up, but a guilt-stricken Leruo informs her that they can't be together or see each other again. Kwanele then confronts his father, questioning if he ordered the Basotho to kill Sihle. This was the first time Kwanele acknowledged that he knows his father is in cahoots with the Basotho. I would have preferred it if his father was operating behind his back, because now Kwanele looks complicit in his father's dirty dealings. An angry Dumisani immediately contacted the top 4, revealing his relation to Sihle. Moretlo gets summoned to a top 4 meeting, where they reveal that she's being expelled from the group after almost killing Dumisani's future daughter-in-law. Bandile gets another visit from Detective Flope, who is investigating the shooting. She quickly realizes that Bandile was the target of the shooting in an attempted hit. Upon hearing this, Bandile decided to go on the offensive, requesting that Spamola find the top 4 so he can go to Lesotho and kill them before they kill him. Just as they're about to leave for Lesotho, Bandile's wife, Nolande, warns him that if he goes through with this, the cycle of violence will never end. She even goes as far as suggesting that Bandile sells the farm. Leruo is lonely after returning to Nyakalo's and discovering that she is now with his cousin. The episode ends with Sihle and Kwanele somewhat reconciling as she continues to use the poor guy as a rebound. Episode 17 picks up with Bandile on the hunt for the top 4. Him and Spamola have arrived in Lesotho, interrogating civilians for information on the cattle raiding leaders. Back home, Bandile gets the farm appraised, but he is not happy with the quote he's given of only 10 million rands. This leads to an argument between Bandile and Nolwande, who is eager to sell the farm. Meanwhile, Sihle has been released from the hospital and her aunt begins pushing her to follow through with her wedding to Kwanele. But a heartbroken Sihle still longs for Leruo, who is also down after ending things with Sihle. Tladi's gang has slowly taken over most of Leruo's operation, and he is now driving around in a flashy new car. Tladi's father, Leabua, meets with the top 4 in an attempt to get their blessing for their new gang, and after a little bribery, they gave him their blessings for Tladi's gang to continue operating and allowed Leabua to claim Moretlo's vacant top 4 seat. Back at the Okabeni farm, Bandile and his wife reconcile, and the episode ends with him agreeing to sell the farm. Episode 18 picks up with Tladi, who pays Moretlo and Leruo a visit, showing off his newfound wealth and revealing their newly formed alliance with the top 4. But Leruo doesn't care. He condemns the cattle raiding game after what happened to Sihle, whilst his mother blames their misfortunes on his ill-fated relationship with Sihle, reminding him that he comes from a long line of cattle raiders. At the Okabeni farm, Bandile informs Sihle that he is considering selling the farm, and his sister gives her blessing. However, Sihle is desperate to see Leruo again and embarks on a mission to find him, ultimately packing her bags for Lesotho and leaving without telling her family. Back in Lesotho, Leruo is looking for new ways to make money. His friend Tseko suggests they head to Joburg where his cousin can help them get jobs. Leruo says goodbye to his mother, with the two friends narrowly missing Sihle at the Lesotho border. Back at the Okabeni farm, Bandile confides in Dumisani about his difficulty finding a good price for the farm, and Dumisani doesn't hesitate to make an offer of 15 million rands, 5 million up front, with an additional 10 million within 2 to 3 years after a deduction of the 2 million that Bandile's father borrowed from Dumisani before he passed on. The episode ends with Bandile announcing that he will not sell the farm, and Sihle's disappearance causing panic in the Biela home. Episode 19 picks up in Joburg. Tseko's friend, Addington. Meanwhile, Sihle has arrived in Lesotho, looking for Leruo, when she starts having car trouble and some bandits try to rob her. She is saved by a woman who chases them away with a rifle and introduces herself as Letta. I love this scene, as Sihle's car is always giving her car trouble. I think they really should have switched that up there. Letta invites Sihle to her home, where it's revealed that she is the wife of Tseko's friend, Addington, who seems to be living a double life with another woman in Joburg, where he's working as an illegal miner. Leruo and Tseko join Addington's gang, but they wouldn't get an opportunity to work the mine. The episode ends with another gang arriving and starting a shootout. Episode 20 resumes with the shootout at the mine. Addington sadly loses his life before Leruo and Tseko are able to make a narrow escape. The two friends quickly make their way back to Lesotho, hiking without a scent on them. Sihle meanwhile is getting comfortable with Addington's family, who have taken her in as she tends to patients in the community. Sihle tells Letta how her parents died and how she met Leruo, but Letta later questions if she can deal with the fact that Leruo is a Mosotho. Once Sihle's car was fixed, Letta gave her directions to the Tsaula household, where Leruo had just arrived to find that his mother was away visiting his grandfather. The episode ends with the lovers' reunion, Sihle finally arriving at Leruo's doorstep where the couple embraces. Episode 21 picks up with Sihle and Leruo's reunion in Lesotho, with the couple proclaiming their love to each other and start living like a married couple. Even Tseko is impressed when he meets Sihle, but he warns Leruo that he can't trust her. Word quickly reaches Tladi that Leruo is back and he's loved up with a Zulu doctor in the Tsaule home. Tladi threatens Addington's family for information on the Zulu doctors they gave refuge to, and discovers that Sihle is from the Okabeni farm where he slayed her parents. Tladi, being the villain he is, rushed over to Leruo's place, where Sihle had just discovered her family's cowbell hanging like a souvenir in the Tsaule kraal. Tladi revealed to Sihle that her lover is a cattle thief and the ruthless mastermind of their operation, pinning the murders of Sihle's parents on Leruo. The episode ends with a heartbroken Sihle walking away in disbelief as the ringing cowbell reaffirms Tladi's accusations. Episode 22 picks up with Leruo stepping outside to find that Sihle was gone, but she had left her family's cowbell in plain sight, so Leruo would know why she left without saying goodbye. Moreto arrived shortly after, and upon hearing that her son was playing house with Sihle while she was away, she scolded Leruo for being careless and inviting the sister of the man that is hunting them into their home. Tsoles are on high alert and decide to lay low, fearing that Sihle has already told Bandile what she discovered. Nolande and Bandile are arguing again following his dramatic U-turn where he decided to keep the farm. His uncle is also displeased with Bandile's decision, which ultimately leads to Nolande packing her things and leaving with their daughter. Just as it seemed like his entire family had turned against him, Sihle finally returns. The episode ends with her telling Bandile he made the right decision, but not mentioning any of what she discovered in Lesotho. In episode 23, the farmers of Beckville commend Bandile for leading them and teaching them how to protect their assets. Even Detective Sope pays Bandile a visit and admits his way is working, with weeks going by without any cows missing. The detective suggests the Zulu farmers form an alliance with the police, but Bandile tells her that he needs to consult with the rest of the farmers first and shuts her down when she starts asking about his family. Back in Lesotho, the top four, which now includes Tladi's father, Leabua, discuss the resumption of raids on the Zulus. Leabua recommends they resume their raids while the other members believe they should lay low till the farmers let their guard down. Meanwhile, Sihle shows up at Kwanele's doorstep, but she doesn't receive a warm welcome, even questioning if she's been having an affair. Sihle denies cheating, but Kwanele isn't having it. The episode ends with him telling his fiancée to come back when she's ready to be honest. Episode 24 picks up with Sihle looking to make amends with Kwanele. The two families meet to discuss the possibility of reconciliation. The Dlaminis give Sihle a hard time, but they ultimately accept Sihle's apology, with the wedding being scheduled to go ahead. Bandile also assured Dumisani that he'll repay what his family owes after he's able to hold a cattle auction. Meanwhile, Tladi is getting bold and has begun stealing cattle from his own people despite his father warning him that he is breaking more rules. He's also in hot water with Nyakalo after cheating on her in the previous episode. Tladi disregards the warnings and threats, splashing the cash on a wild night with Mosa in Joburg. The episode ends with Nyakalo vowing to teach Tladi a lesson.
Wa ne ke le wena ne ke tla jwetsa otse e le o thweng ke mora hao gore e tle ntetsetse pele o qobellwa ke o khutlela mehleng ya o ya ona maludi ha le sa apara maranta jalo ka lebaka laka manyofonyofana nka wa fedisa ka o panya leihlo
le teka se wena hatta kosele pele go thuwa hlo.
Episode 25 picks up with Sihle and Kwanele finally setting a wedding date. Sihle agrees to resign from her job after the wedding, something Kwanele's father was pleased to hear. However, Sihle once again begins doubting her decision, but Aunt Deli reminds her that a future with Kwanele isn't a bad one. Meanwhile, Tladi is still gallivanting in Joburg, and Nyakalo has had enough. She requests help from her mother, who is a Sangoma. Nyakalo's mother gives her some muti to help her win Tladi back and ultimately get married into the Zola family. As she's leaving Tladi's place, she overhears Leabua's call with the top four, summoning him and his son for a meeting. Tladi returns from Joburg, cockier than ever. Leabua and his son meet with the top four, faced with the charges of stealing from their own people. Despite further trying to apologize for his son, the hot-headed Tladi refuses to back down, with guns being drawn between him and the top four. The top four are able to capture the father-son duo and tie them to a burning tree. Just as it seemed like they'll burn to death, Nyakalo arrived, shooting the members of the top four and then demanding that Tadi marries her if he doesn't want to burn. The episode ends with Tadi reluctantly accepting to marry Nyakalo, whose muti seemingly worked. In episode 26, Sihle Nkwanele's Zulu wedding unfolds, with the couple exchanging vows and celebrations ensuing. A drunk Bandile confronts his wife about returning home, but Nolande refuses and is completely turned off by his behavior. Meanwhile, in Lesotho, there is also a cause to celebrate, with Tadi's family paying lobola to Nyakalo's family. The families celebrate their pending union, with Nyakalo already packing her bags. Her mother gives her some extra muti and makes Nyakalo promise to send her kids to her so she can essentially raise them too. Sounds like a deal with the devil if you ask me. Nonetheless, the lobola celebrations continue, but a rebellion is brewing. Whilst Leroux and Moreto are laying low, Addington's wife, Letta, pays them a visit to report Tadi for stealing cattle from the Basotho and spreading wickedness in the community. The episode ends with her requesting that Leroux and his mother come back to reclaim the cattle raiding operation and restore order in the community. Episode 27 picks up at the Okabeni farm the morning after Sihle's wedding. Bandile wakes up with Detective Klope in his bed, having seemingly hooked up at the wedding. Spamola sees the detective leaving the farm and questions a dismissive Bandile about his whereabouts on the day of the wedding. Spamola's interrogation is interrupted by news that 4 cows are missing, including Becky's favorite. It's revealed that the cattle had wandered away and mixed with some other cows, which Bandile suspected were sick from a terrible outbreak which has been plaguing the area. Because of this, he insists that they don't take the cows back to prevent them infecting the remaining ones at the farm. Spamola doesn't listen. He decides to bring Becky's favorite cow back home, which Bandile deservedly punches him for. That was a foolish move by Spamola, with Bandile being forced to put down his father's favorite cow. Back in Lesotho, Leroux finds the lifeless bodies of the top 4 members. Leroux decides to confront Tlali, questioning how his former raiders could follow such evil. Now that the top 4 is gone, Moreto and her father, Njapedi, tried to convince Leroux to overthrow Tladi and lead the community. The episode ends with his grandfather vowing to stand with him in his fight against Tladi. Episode 28 picks up with Bandile being forced to put down another cow. He hands the gun to Spamola, charging him with the job of executioner. Bandile orders tests for the rest of the cattle and the wait for the results begins. Spamola decides to pack his bags and leave, but Bandile chases him down and begs him to come back. His uncle and aunt are not happy about this, questioning Bandile's ability to lead and blaming him for the recklessness in the incident. The anxiety of waiting for the cattle's results gets to Bandile, and he once again hooks up with Detective Sope. Meanwhile, in Lesotho, Leroux calls for a meeting with his former cattle raiders, where he announces that he is back in the game and asks for their trust. The raiders agree to return and ride with Leroux, with only one question left: where to raid. Leroux's grandfather suggests they resume cattle raiding in new territories, mainly the Free State. The gang arrives in the Free State for their first heist, and the episode ends with Leroux's grandfather discreetly rounding up the cattle all by himself as the other raiders watched on in disbelief, proving that he truly was a great raider, and he still has it. Episode 29 picks up with Detective Sope waking Bandile up from a terrible nightmare. A guilt-stricken Bandile reminds the detective that he's married, and they both agree that they're not looking for anything more than a hookup. The outbreak of the Okabeni farm is worsening as some of the infected cattle come down with the fever, and Spamola is once again charged with putting them down. Bandile's uncle and aunt once again lay the blame at Spamola and their nephew's feet. Bandile defends himself and demands that they know their place. The results for the cattle finally arrived, and luckily all of the remaining cattle test negative, meaning they survived the outbreak. Bandile reports the news to his wife and once again begs her to come back home. Nolanda finally concedes and agrees to return home with Bandile as she tells their daughter to pack her bags. Back in Lesotho, Leroux and his grandfather return with their spoils from the Free State. To Moreto's delight, they had successful raids with her father and son bonding over their natural, inherent ability to steal cattle. Word soon reaches Tladi that all his riders have abandoned him to rejoin Leroux's gang. Tladi immediately wants to kill his cousin, but Nyakalo calms him down before suggesting they go to the tavern. Upon arriving at the tavern, they find Leroux and his gang partying it up. Tladi immediately confronts his cousin, but Leroux beats him up, and it could have been worse if Nyakalo hadn't stepped in to protect her husband. The episode ends with the wounded couple vowing to make them pay. Episode 30 picks up with Leroux and his family in high spirits as they prepare to go and sell the cattle they raided from the Free State. But Tladi is also plotting revenge and sees the sale as an opportunistic time to teach Leroux a lesson. Meanwhile, at the Okabeni farm, Bandile's family has returned, and upon seeing how happy Mbali is back on the farm, Nolande apologizes to Bandile for taking his daughter away. However, Detective Sope arrives at the farm unannounced with a bottle of wine to find that Nolande is back. The suspecting wife interrogated the nervous detective and kept the bottle of wine before showing her husband's sneaky link to the door, but she didn't mention anything about the visit to Bandile. Back in Lesotho, Tladi and his wife have taken Moreto hostage before summoning Leroux to the mountains. Leroux wasted no time going to save his mother. A standoff ensues, and with his grandfather's help, they were able to save Moreto, but Njapedi is shot and killed by Nyakalo. A vigil for the old man follows, with Leroux vowing to avenge his grandfather. I personally thought Tladi's initial plan was to hijack Leroux's cattle before it was sold, or use it as ransom in exchange for Moreto, so missed opportunity there. The episode ends with Bandile receiving the most unlikely of visitors. After taking another defeat to Leroux, Tladi has now turned to using Bandile in his fight against his cousin. He revealed Sefofani's true identity to Bandile and threw Sihle under the bus by suggesting she can confirm who Leroux is. What a villain. Episode 31 picks up with the revelation that Bandile got the wrong man and Sefofane is still alive. Bandile is in denial that Sihle knew anything, but he confronts his sister, who he hadn't seen since the day of her wedding. Sihle finally tells her brother everything she knew and discovered in Lesotho. A disappointed Bandile condemns Sihle and her actions, demanding that she begs the ancestors for forgiveness. Sihle, however, has doubts that the man she loved could ever be a murderer, and decides that she needs to warn Leroux before Bandile, who is already on his way to Lesotho, gets to him. Episode 32 picks up just as Bandile and Pamela arrive at the Tsola household to discover that Leroux and his family have abandoned the home and taken refuge in the mountains. Bandile decides to wait for them until he realizes that Sihle might have been the one to warn Leroux. Just as they are about to give up, Leroux's protege turned spy arrives and offers to take Bandile to Leroux's hideout. Zeko tries to warn the Zola family, but a chase ensues, resulting in a shootout, with Bandile claiming another Soto life. Leroux's grandmother is killed, with him and his mother narrowly escaping across the river. Tladi is beyond himself after another failed attempt on Leroux and his mother's lives, but Nyakalo has another trick up his sleeve. The couple pays Dumisani a visit to request his help in eliminating Leroux and his mother. Dumisani seems uninterested until Nyakalo mentions that Leroux had an affair with a Zulu doctor named Sihle, Dumisani's doctor-in-law. The episode ends with Dumisani agreeing to form an alliance with Tladi and his meddling wife. Episode 33 picks up following Dumisani finding out that Sihle had an affair with Leroux. Dumisani and Tladi discuss the nature of their alliance, with Tladi and Nyakalo request the money and guns they can use to fund the hunt for Leroux and his mother. A suspicious Dumisani refused at first, but the persuasive Nyakalo was able to convince him to agree to their request. Tladi and Nyakalo wasted no time, putting 100,000 bounty on Leroux's head, leading to all the outlaws in Lesotho joining the hunt for the Tsole family. Leroux and his mother are forced to bury Moreto's mother in a shallow grave, depriving her of a dignified funeral. Moreto is grief-stricken after losing 2 parents in a week and vows to avenge his mother. Moreto blames Bandile and wants him dead, whereas Leroux's anger is directed at Tladi, who used Bandile to do his dirty work. Meanwhile, Bandile has returned from Lesotho and reports to his wife that Sihle was responsible for their failure to kill Leroux. He makes his way to the Dlamini home where Sihle is trying to be a good housewife. He confronts his sister for betraying him, banishing her from their family's farm and essentially disowning her. In a surprising twist, it's revealed that Kwanele overheard their confrontation, but to my surprise, neither him or his father mentioned to Sihle what they had discovered. Dumisani was busy this episode as he continued to restructure the cattle raiding operation. First, we are reintroduced to the corrupt official from the first 2 episodes who Leruo was working with previously. Dumisani offers him an opportunity to join him in replacing the top 4 so the Basotho can resume their raids in KZN. The official resists, citing the farmers' uprising led by Bandile. However, Dumisani convinces him to join him by suggesting that plans are in motion to eliminate Bandile. Dumisani's sinister plan is revealed when he arrives in Lesotho for a meeting with Tladi and his wife, where they agree to resume their raids in KZN. The episode ends with Dumisani ordering his new allies to raid all the cattle that Bandile has left at the Okabeni farm and kill him in the process. Episode 34 picks up with Leruo, Moretlo, and Tseko hiding out in the mountains. Leruo is getting restless and wants to make a move on Tladi, but he's a wanted man, so Tseko offers to go back and keep an eye on Tladi and his people's movements. Meanwhile, Tladi is rallying his men for a return to the Okabeni farm, where they are sure to face resistance from Bandide and the other Zulu farmers. In a chilling pep talk, Tladi once again showed us why he's such a great villain. He didn't just order his men to go and kill Bandile, but his wife and child as well. Following the pep rally, Tseko was able to capture Musa at the tavern before taking him back to the mountains where he was interrogated and tortured. Musa finally breaks after Moretlo brands him with the cattle iron, revealing Tladi's plans to raid the Okabeni farm again and kill Bandile. The struggle between mother and son resumes, with Leruo eager to warn Sihle that her family is in danger. Moretlo resents the fact that her son would be willing to help the man who killed her mother. Even the ever-reliable Tseko refused to support Leruo for the first time in the show, reminding him that the Zulu farmers are their sworn enemies. A determined Leruo said his goodbyes with the hope that he can make it to the Okabeni farm before Tladi and his men do. Meanwhile, at the Dlamini home, Dumisani asked Sihle why Bandile was in such a rage when he left, but Sihle lied to his face, suggesting Bandile was mad at Spamola about some farm business. Kwanele watched on in anger as his sweet wife skillfully danced around Dumisani's questions before joining in on the interrogation, giving further indication that he's onto her. Kwanele then decides to confide in his father about Sihle's affair with Leruo, and to his surprise, Dumisani reveals that he already knew and encourages his son to discipline Sihle. Unfortunately, Kwanele took his father's advice and finally confronted Sihle about the affair. The episode ends with a helpless Sihle being brutally assaulted by Kwanele. What a heel turn by Kwanele. His family has built their wealth by stealing from their community for a very long time, and ultimately, they're responsible for the deaths of Becky and Nandi. Episode 35 opens up with Leruo's arrival at the Okabeni farm. Leruo formally introduces himself to Bandile as Sofofane. Leruo pleaded his innocence in the murder of Bandile's parents, and the two men reached common ground upon Bandile finding out that he killed Leruo's grandmother. In an unexpected twist, Leruo revealed that Dumisani has been working with the Basotho this entire time. They both agreed to report Dumisani to the police, but he was already onto them after Musa was able to escape and alert Tladi that their plans had been uncovered. Dumisani and his son arrived at the Biela home, interrupting their dinner and demanding to see Bandile, who was in his office with Leruo. The father-son duo cornered Bandile and Leruo just as they were leaving the office, drawing their weapons and shooting Bandile, who advised Leruo to make a run for it. Bandile's concerned family rushed outside to find their in-laws and Leruo standing over a wounded Bandile. Leruo took Bandile's advice and fled the scene, with Kwanele and his father putting on an Oscar-winning performance, pinning the shooting on Leruo. Bandile was rushed to the hospital, where even Sihle arrived after informing her abusive husband that she is leaving him and going back to Okabeni. Spamola then arrived at the hospital with CCTV footage of Leruo escaping the farm after Bandile was shot, which supported the Dlamini story and made him look guilty. The episode ends with a close-up of a disappointed Sihle as she watches the video of her ex-lover. Episode 36 picks up with the news that Bandile survived the shooting and is now in a coma, with Dumisani and his son planning to cut off his life support the first chance they get. Sihle tries to comfort Nolande, but she blames her for bringing Leroux into their lives and forces her to report her ex-lover to the police, where she also told Detective Sope that Leroux is responsible for her parents' murders. The police began a massive manhunt for Leroux, who arrived home to the news that he was the most wanted man in all of Lesotho and South Africa. Back at the Dlamini household, Sihle returns for her belongings, but she was forced to leave them behind when Kwanele refused and began intimidating her. An undeterred Sihle returned to the Biela home, where Uncle Emmanuel and Aunt Deli's true colors were revealed. With Bandile's life hanging in the balance, Sihle finds her aunt and uncle in the process of packing, but to her disappointment, they have looted the Biela home and plan to leave with more than they came with. The resilient Sihle once again picked up the pieces and stepped up to the responsibility of restoring her family home and defending the farm. In a rallying speech, she reassured the farm employees that she will look out for them and the farm until Bandile can recover. Kwanele informs his father that Sihle has gone back to Okabeni and wants a divorce. Dumisani encouraged his son to fight for his marriage, but upon realizing that his son isn't willing to, Dumisani suggested that they kill Sihle and finish off Bandile before taking over the farm. He wasted no time calling up his partners in Lesotho to raid the farm immediately and kill Sihle by any means. Gadi took his orders seriously, promising 20,000 to whoever kills Sihle, but the stealthy Tseko once again overheard the group's sinister plans. The episode ends with Tseko reporting the news to Leroux, who vows to kill his cousin. Episode 37 picks up with Gadi and his men invading the Okabeni farm. Sihle does her best to defend the property, but they're easily overpowered, and just as it seemed like Sihle was about to be captured, Leroux came to her rescue. Leroux explained to Sihle that Dumisani is the real villain and the one who shot Bandile. Whether she believed him or not, she had no choice but to flee to Lesotho with Leroux as a massacre ensued on the Okabeni farm, with 16 farm workers being killed. Despite failing to kill Sihle, Gadi and his gang returned to Lesotho with over 300 cattle. However, he began questioning how Leroux is always a step ahead and suspects that Musa is a mole, feeding Leroux information. Gadi threatened to kill the young raider, but Leabua calmed down his paranoid son as the hunt for Sihle, Leroux, and his mother continued. The episode ends with Leroux and Sihle arriving back at their hideout in Lesotho, where she met Moretlo for the first time in a charming introduction. In episode 38, Dumisani and his son meet with Gadi and his wife to discuss their failure to kill Leroux and Sihle. Nyakalo, who is also obsessed with killing Sihle, promises the Dlamini men that they'll get the job done, with Kwanele personally requesting that Sihle is brought to him alive so he can finish her off himself. News of the Okabeni raid has reached Nolande at the hospital, and she is enraged by the fact that Sihle left with Leroux, even suggesting that she might have set their farm up for the raid. The Dlaminis arrived at the hospital, eager to monitor Bandile's progress, but Nolande warned them that they wouldn't even get the opportunity to see him, with Pamola standing guard. Meanwhile, Sihle gets to know Moretlo and catches up with Leroux. The couple has a heart-to-heart, with Leroux explaining that he is not a murderer and the events that led to the demise of Sihle's parents. The couple reconciled, and with the help of Moretlo, they devised a plan to break into the Dlamini home to steal Dumisani's logbook and deliver it to the police. Sihle then impressed Leroux during target practice, showcasing some of the skills her father taught her. However, Musa was able to lead Gadi and Nyakalo to the area where they were hiding out, with the sinister couple capturing Sihle, who was about to take a dip in the river. The episode ends with the concerned Bandile finally waking up from his coma and asking where his sister is because her life is in danger. Episode 39 picks up in the aftermath of Sihle being captured by Tladi and his wife. However, they don't get far before Leroux and Tseko catch up with them. They freed Sihle while capturing Tladi and Nyakalo. Back at their camp, Leroux questioned Tladi about where they had planned to meet Dumisani and Kwanele. Tladi claimed he was to call Dumisani once they had captured Sihle, so Leroux took him to an area where there was network. Tladi made the call to Dumisani, who demanded Sihle was delivered to him in KZN, but Tladi was able to convince him to meet them in Lesotho. After the call, we were treated to an old-school duel between the cousins. Leruo, unwilling to kill a defenseless man, gave Tladi a weapon, and after a standoff they both reached for their weapons, with Leruo dropping his cousin with a single shot. Leruo returned to their camp to find that Nyakalo had been rescued by Musa, but their focus shifted to planning their ambush on Dumisani and Kwanele, who Sihle admitted she wanted dead. Meanwhile at the hospital, Bandile has woken up from his coma, revealing to his family that Dumisani was the one that shot him. He explained to his wife and Spamola that Sihle and Leruo had nothing to do with the recent raid on the Okabeni farm. Bandile demanded that they summon Detective Sope, who revealed that she had also been investigating Dumisani, but had not been able to mount enough evidence against him. Sope reveals she had been working on the case with Detective Zwane, who turns out to be the corrupt officer who is currently working with Dumisani. Despite Bandile's doubts about him, Sope insisted that Zwane can be trusted. When she got back to the station, Sope updated Zwane on Bandile's condition and revealed that they had enough to arrest Dumisani. Zwane gave nothing away. He claimed he would support Dumisani's arrest and suggested they move Bandile out of the hospital for his safety. Detective Sope helped move Bandile to his Aunt Deli and Uncle Emmanuel's house, where his wife and Spamola joined them. However, when Sope met up with Zwane again, she willingly gave up the location before she was shot by Dumisani's double agent. The episode ends with Sope using her last bit of strength to call Bandile, warning him that Zwane is working with Dumisani and is on his way to his location. Episode 40 picks up at Aunt Deli and Uncle Emmanuel's place. The family assesses their options with Detective Zwane on his way. Pumzile warns them that they can't move Bandile because he might aggravate his injury, so the family decides to hold their ground and make a stand. They barricaded the home and armed themselves. Shortly after, Detective Zwane arrived with an entire SWAT team, but Bandile blew half of them away with a homemade bomb. A shootout then ensued between the police and Bandile with the support of Spamola, Uncle Emmanuel, and Aunt Deli. After the smoke cleared, Bandile and his family were victorious. Meanwhile, in Lesotho, Leruo and Sihle prepared for their ambush on Dumisani and Kwanele. However, the father-son duo suspected that something was off and came with backup. A shootout ensued between the two groups, but Leruo had a rifle and the high ground. He was able to take out the Dlamini security before sniping Dumisani with his final bullet. A heartbreaking Kwanele then took his father's gun and chased the couple down, shooting Leruo and taking aim at Sihle. However, she was able to pull a knife out of Leruo's boot, throwing it straight at her husband's chest and dropping him instantly. She quickly grabbed Kwanele's phone and called her brother. The siblings caught each other up, and Sihle requested that they organize medical assistance for the wounded Leruo. While all this is going down, Nyakalo was able to find Tladi's seemingly dead body, but she took it back to her mother, who removed the bullet and performed a ritual. The episode ends with Tladi rising from the dead, just as they had given up on reviving him. It's been a pleasure reviewing this show with you guys, and I'll be back next season with more reviews. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is ASR, for the love of African filmmaking and storytelling.